every other country has seen the flattening of cost and spending, and there's huge debate how much is structural, how much of it is recession, and I've kind of come out that half of it's recession and half of it's structural because there's huge structural reform going on. How much of the, first of all, the cost savings, if you repealed Obamacare, because with all the tax increases, they go with the repeal, so of course it's going to cost a fortune. And I'm not a repeal person. I don't think a lot of substantive thinking recognizes just repeal for the reasons that Henry said. Unless you have an alternative that's compared to the Affordable Care Act as we know it today, not in the pre-ACA world, but today. The ACA world has become the standard. It's institutionalized. It's culturally there. It's not popular. So the repeal vote, you say, how could these crazy Republicans take this to another vote to repeal it when it's so impractical? Remember, the American people do not like this bill. There are more people who regard it unfavorably than favorably, and if you're a politician who wants to get elected and be a great leader, it's not crazy.
Is there a cruise care out there or something?
Yeah, where's the alternative? Where's the alternative?
I think that's the point. That's Henry's point,
Yeah.
that unless you put an alternative on the table.
Right.
And that's,
Well, they have
that's
an
the
alternative. They've always said just run a large risk pool. Just go back to the old
Yeah, but
days,
that's
put
not-
everybody who's sick. That's the Republican
okay,
alternative,
okay.
and it's
I
been
was just going to
suggested
say,
over and over
I think
again.
what people are doing is they're listening to their political leadership. If you're a Democrat, you're going to listen to your Democratic leadership. If you're a Republican, you're going to listen to everybody from Mitch McConnell on down saying how bad it is, and you're going to say, well, they say it's bad. But then you ask them, well, what do you think about the fact that you can't ever be dropped again? Oh, I love that. What about the fact that your children can sign up to your parents' plan? Oh, I love that. That's in there too? What about expanding Medicaid to people that otherwise could never have any access to insurance? I love that. So we're talking about the Affordable Care Act, you know. Well, I don't care what it's called. I love those things. I just don't like the Affordable Care Act.
Well, and if you call it Obamacare,
Yeah,
it goes down even
that's
more, right?
But I think that's it. I think
What
it's
don't you like? I don't
I
like
think
the
it's
Obama
really,
part of Obama.
it's
Right.
not
Let me ask
real for
before-
a lot of these
Right.
people until you can tell them what the bill does.
Somewhere along the line, despite the propaganda words that people use in talking about this issue, there ought to be an examination of the facts.
Oh, Henry.
One of the objectives,
Henry.
Shocked.
one of the objectives of the law was to reduce the number of uninsured. That's happened dramatically. The second objective was to reform the health care system by all the incentives to change from pay for quantity to pay for quality, to hold down costs by making health care more efficient. We were told more by the Republican leaders in the House, I won't blame these Senator Frist, but we were told more people will lose their health insurance if Obamacare is continued. Not true. More people will lose their jobs. Not true. It will break the budget. That wasn't true. So at some point, people have to evaluate what has happened with this law. And I think by any measure, it has been a great success. Now, the Republicans can say, Obamacare, we hate it. But as Tom Daschle said, you go through all the parts of it, and now it's a reality for millions of people. I think they're going to start thinking that perhaps when they hear the mantra, this is a terrible thing that's happened, people are going to say, well, yeah, I don't like Obamacare, but things are happening in the right direction. So somewhere before elections, you would hope that people would look at what the reality is, not just the propaganda.
I think just on the cost issue, because I don't know if we're going to come back to it, I think we have to be very careful in two things. First of all, we have had this flattening in spending, and the policymakers, and everybody here at Aspen, we can talk about that. And I think it is important. Other countries have seen it. And again, there's lots of Republicans, you say don't pay attention to it, and others will say Obamacare has caused it all to flatten, saving you so much money. The truth is somewhere in between, but I think we have to be very careful because from a policy standpoint, we have seen a flattening of spending. It will increase over time. Probably half of it's structural, of which Obamacare is part of it, but the private sector and capitalism and markets and competition and innovation and creativity, which are outside of Obamacare, are part as well. But if you do look at the last...
There's enough competition and innovation, or could there be more than there is?
A lot more with the transparency. Obamacare and the Affordable Care Act worked in that regard. We need a whole lot more. Yesterday's decision where you are when a patient walks into a surgical care clinic or sees a doctor, and they're bringing money with them, which is what Obamacare does through a subsidy and insurance, you have more transparency possible in pricing. You don't have as much cost shifting going on where you have to, tax the insured people and charge them a lot more than the uninsured. And that's a good thing. There's transparency, but we need a lot more of that. But on the cost issue, just let me close on it real quick. If you look at the last 4 quarters, because we can't be complacent about that, the individual has seen almost a doubling of the percent increase compared to last year each quarter. And Drew Altman, the Wall Street Journal, has a great chart there. So just watch out what we're saying about that because costs are exploding. With deductibles so high, more skin in the game, our out-of-pocket expenditures are skyrocketing. The cost issue is something we have to address. And in fixing Obamacare, whatever fixing it means, and in the new legislation, cost is going to be the issue out there. And that's what the individual is going to feel. As their costs go up personally, they don't care that we say as policymakers there's a flattening in spending because they're paying more for what they were getting 5 years ago and 10 years ago, and that's a problem.